What's up, YouTube? So I posted a video about Scotty Kilmer bragging that superchargers were better than turbochargers. Well, I have to disagree. And why wouldn't I disagree with that? Well, only because I come from building hot rods and race car background. And I would tell you that it is cheaper, more affordable to build a single turbo kit. Ask any Honda guy, right? Get a turbo for $150, get a turbo manifold for the same, some simple exhaust work, some simple injectors, a lot of simple things available today. In the old days, it was a bit more complex, but the availability of parts and stuff, and thanks to China, it makes it affordable. Now let's just talk about Scotty Kilmer saying superchargers. Well, Scotty Kilmer must have got paid a lot of money to promote this supercharger shop. So he's a tuner, and I guess he sells and installs many superchargers. Well, superchargers on average start around $3,000 to $4,000 just to buy a supercharger, right? Not to even install it and not to even tune it. So give you an average of a supercharger kit for a Honda. We'll just pick a Honda Civic. Probably $5,000 to $7,000 for a supercharger, manifold, bolt-on-ish, tune, blah 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 blah. Now take that same Honda Civic, buy a turbo manifold, and buy a turbo, and buy a turbo downpipe, and make some connections. You're talking maybe $1,000 or less, all said and done, if you do the work yourself. And Hondas are the most simplest vehicles for hot rodders to work on. One, there's not much to them. Two, parts are plenty. And three, the Japanese and Chinese have made all types of performance parts in the almost free section. So what, other than cost, for a supercharger versus a turbocharger? Well, we already discussed that superchargers are outrageously expensive to put on any vehicle, right? Any vehicle. And you're almost limited to that. So a turbocharger runs off exhaust pressure, and a supercharger runs off a belt drive or direct off the crankshaft, which is robbing power from the engine instantly. So you see some of these guys that have these giant Pro Chargers or giant blowers, well, because they need to be so big to make 2,000 and 3,000 horsepower. And then you take a guy that has one giant single turbo or two giant single turbos, and they win no prep kings and things like that. Yeah, so the cost of a supercharger job is effing ridiculous. And we're just using that for comparisons. Now, every vehicle has its own level of issues for installing, making, fitting, blah, 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 blah. But if you're just doing a single turbo, it is fairly... Look at all the single turbo LS guys out there. Probably the most affordable option next to nitrous, right? And nitrous is fairly free when you're talking about bolting on horsepower or spraying horsepower. But I disagree with Scotty Kilmer that supercharging is better than turbocharging. Not at all. I've been a turbo guy for years. Most manufacturers are putting turbos on just about every vehicle. Small displacement, small high output turbos. Because the turbos are affordable and efficient. It keeps the cost way down. Turbochargers typically are lubricated from the engine oil. Superchargers usually have a sealed case, which kind of sucks for maintenance because the smaller the case of oil that it's storing, the faster the failure is going to happen inside of a supercharger. So there's a lot of trade-offs, but a supercharger in most cases is an instant power. So from idle to, we'll just say, 3,000 RPM. Okay, a smaller turbocharger, well fitted to the displacement of the engine, will pretty much have really good throttle response from idle on up. And turbos kind of work the same way, but you can buy them in different trim packages. So I'm going to say hands down that superchargers is not the best way to go. For a guy that has deep pockets and just wants to tell everyone he has a supercharger, maybe, but I'm going to say the turbo kit's the way to go. And once you build, I'll just give you an example, a single turbo, and you want to upgrade, you just buy a bigger turbo in that trim. And it's cheap. So, oh yeah, I want to upgrade my $150 turbo to a $200 turbo. I want to upgrade my $7,000 supercharger to a $10,000 supercharger and really not get that much of a difference. Yeah. And in most races, well, that's another story. Like, people racing 8th mile instead of the quarter mile. Like, that just changes the brass roots of drag racing. But this is where it is. Most vehicles aren't winning races from idle to 3,000 RPM. Most of these guys are, from 3,000 RPM to 8,500 RPM. So most superchargers are well wrung out past 3,000 RPMs because they're designed to make the average supercharger, right? We're not talking full drag race applications. But the average supercharger doesn't have anything left. And some turbos are built the same way, but in my opinion, turbocharger, single turbocharger versus single supercharger, I'm saying turbos because it is cheaper, way cheaper. You're not going to find a knockoff supercharger for anybody's car for $500 or $300. So
Look at me for a second.
just take that right to the bank. So Scotty Kilmer and him selling his bullshit and selling it for a guy that sells superchargers and tunes, they have their place, but you can't say that supercharging is better than turbocharging. I'm going to tell you, you're wrong. And if that was the case, most manufacturers who build today's vehicles, guess what they would be putting on everybody's car? Supercharger. Thanks for watching.